What is going on, Swoopers? Welcome back to another episode of Swoop Luke. We've got a very special draft episode for you guys. As you're probably aware, I know absolutely nothing about the draft. So I thought, why not call in an expert, Chris Dory, who works at ESPN doing their draft. He's got a YouTube channel as well. Chris, thank you so much for joining us, mate.
Thanks for having me, Luke.
No, it's my pleasure. As I said, you are the draft expert here, and you've done some work on ESPN and various other places and stuff. You want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I've been covering the draft for quite a long time now. So probably 2008 was the first, I guess, taste into the draft. Just watching the TAC Cup Grand Final of the time. So Steel Side Bottom got 10 goals on that stage, 30 disposals. Not sure if you saw it. And then sort of from 2009 onwards, I've been really into it. So for quite a while there, I was just writing on Big Footy. And I had a few offers for a number of years there to sort of start up different websites or contribute to different websites. But when ESPN came knocking, well, fair to say, I thought I'd jump on board and get involved. So I've been doing that since, I don't know what year it would be now, but it's probably around 7 years or thereabouts. So I've been really enjoying my time.
That's insane, because we know that ESPN is one of the biggest in the world, and that's awesome that you're there. So look, let's talk a little bit about this year's actually, before we get into this year's draft, how have you seen Collingwood's draft hand these last couple of years? Because I know we've had a couple of kids go out, a couple of kids that just didn't work out and stuff like that. Caleb Poulter being one of them. Henry goes to Geelong. But how have you seen it?
Well, the one thing to note that a lot of Collingwood fans probably won't be aware of is the Collingwood recruiting team is pretty small compared to other teams. So don't have the exact numbers for you, but basically for the last, say, 10 or so years, they've really been running quite a bit understaffed. Okay. So given that, look, there are reasons for Collingwood's at times relative underperformance, I guess you could say. But I guess if you don't put in the spend, well, it is hard to necessarily outperform other clubs. So
because it's all really about it's about scouting, isn't it? If you don't have enough scouts out, it's just like the world football soccer. They've got scouts out every place, and if you, like you said, if you got a small staff, I didn't even know that. So that's that kind of makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah. So it sort of adds a bit more context as well. And look, Rendell is an example. He being part of the team, well, he left after a while. Don Malisi was part of the team. Well, he's at Bulldogs now. So you've had a lot of key staff leave over the years. So that's also been sort of hard losing that experience sort of gradually over time as well.
Yeah, definitely. So we got Decker trying to mop up and do everything that he can. So let's look at this draft. How do you see this draft, not just for Collingwood, but for the 18 clubs overall?
Sure. So every year there's different dynamics in the draft. One particular strength that I've observed this year is it's very strong in terms of midfielders and forwards. So particularly those that can play a combination. So it feels like probably a lot of influence, maybe a lot of kids growing up watching Dusty or maybe Petrarca in recent years. So there's a bit of that flavor. So a lot of good sort of general forwards. But in terms of the talls, look, probably not as strong. There's a few standout names, but it is relatively thinner. So look, probably average strength overall, but there's some, I guess, key points in the draft where there are opportunities for value.
And you say, this draft is for forwards and like sort of hybrid forward midfielders. And you hear kind of every year where it's like, oh, this draft is it's good, great defenders, or this is a very tall draft, or this is a smaller draft. And is that how people, that's kind of just from the outside looking in. Is that how it kind of really is? Because there's always a mix, but is it always a group of people or group of kids that just kind of come through, and we might have 30 players get drafted over 190 centimeters or something like that?
Yeah, look, it's different every year. So one draft, and this piece will actually go up on ESPN tomorrow, where I'll be looking at the 2017 draft. And what was really phenomenal that year was just the sheer amount of key position players. So if you really look through, well, who were the best players coming out of that draft? It was the key positioners. And I found in looking back, a number of them were really taken quite a lot lower than they should have. So you sometimes also have those opportunities if you really pick out, well, what are those opportunities in this particular draft?
So you ran an ESPN fan draft for the first 3 rounds of of the draft, and you've got us taking at 19, and this is obviously before trades and stuff happen for draft picks. 19, we've got Lewis Hayes. 27, Braden George. 29, Mitch Sibikowski, I think. And
Yeah, Koski,
51,
or however you want to pronounce it.
yeah, and 51, we got Will Verall. Can you look? Lewis Hayes has been linked with us for the last couple of months. Do you want to kind of go through those sort of players, and we'll just talk about what's going on with them?
Yeah, sure. So with a Hayes, I'm basically looking at Collingwood as being a little bit thin, I guess you could say, in defence. So you've obviously got Roughhead, who got hurt. Bringing in Frampton, I think, is actually a positive. And having watched his play at AFL level and the Sandful, respectively, I actually think he could possibly nail down a best 22 spot alongside Moore. So that's an opportunity. You've got, obviously, Charlie Dean as well, rookie listed last year. So here's one where, look, maybe with a clean run with injury, maybe he contends for a spot. But yeah, look, I am still seeing Collingwood being a little bit on the thin side in defence. So maybe a Lewis Hayes, so he's the younger brother of Sam, and really good intercept mark, really good skills. So they're the things he brings to the table. Still very physically immature, but with a late year birthday, he's one of those where he's got quite a bit of scope to develop and showed a great rate of improvement. So
do you kind of, with the intercept marking, is he more of a Darcy Moore type and less of a Jordan Roughhead one-on-one lockdown type?
Yeah, I would agree with that. So again, being quite physically immature, he can get exposed one-on-one. So hopefully as he gets stronger and physically progresses, hopefully he sort of irons that out and becomes stronger. But yeah, that would be sort of the more stylistically what he looks like. Because he's a real accumulator across halfback. He can get really quite high numbers, to say the least. So a lot of it's intercepting, but he's someone where players will be pretty comfortable just kicking it to him and he can generate some drive himself.
It kind of sounds like a nice Jeremy Howe replacement as well, if we can kind of snap him up.
Yeah, look, with Howe, he's probably not quite that key position height. I know he's often asked to play key position, but yeah, look, I guess you could look at that. But yeah, really sort of any of those medium-sized sort of marking types, there's always opportunities to put them behind the ball. So Max Grzuski in this draft is an example where he reminds me so much of a Jeremy Howe, where a bit like Howe as a junior, Howe actually came through as a forward and his early years for Melbourne was a forward. And with a Grzuski, he's mostly played forward and he's that real sort of high leaping, strong marking type, so he could very easily make the same transition as with a Howe into defense.
One guy that I'm pretty interested in is Braden George. There's been a lot of talk with him that he might go earlier than you got him at 27 here. Bit of a hybrid, like you said, midfield forward. How do you rate him, and what can he bring to the table?
Sure. So I did a recent for my YouTube. So I did a sort of power rankings tier list. So I had sort of I guess you could call it 11 to 22 range. And then Braden George was just in that group outside of that.
Yep.
The things that I'm looking at. So prolific goal kicker, very athletic, very strong, really dangerous forward of center, but probably needs to develop his endurance, still be able to push up the ground more, be able to push through the midfield, start winning more of the footy. So just really doesn't find enough of it at this stage. So yeah, look, for me, he's in that probably on quality for mine, probably that sort of almost 23 to 45, but he will go much earlier than that on draft day. And he could be a late first, could be early second. That's his rough range.
And who does he kind of resemble in the AFL at the moment?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think on that one. I haven't actually thought about player comparisons, honestly, but maybe something like almost a Gary Rowan, I suppose. Look, he's physically stronger than that and more of a contested style. Yep. But a bit like a Rowan, look, he can go quiet at times, but on his day, he can really explode and kick his 3 or 4 goals. Yep. So he can really be a difference maker when he's good. And look, there is that future scope to become a midfielder, but look, he will need to start finding more of the footy to be able to do that and, again, improve the endurance.
Nice. The third guy you've got at 29, 2 picks after that, 27, is Mitch Skibowski. So you got him as a strong ball winning midfielder. Is that where you see him?
Yeah, so he's definitely a midfielder. His special sauce really for me is his distribution by hand, but he's a good all-rounder. So he can rack it up, he can win his own footy, good athletically, good skills overall. So yeah, does most things pretty well. So look, if he was available there, that would be sort of more towards probably the back end of his range. So in drafts past, they've often been sort of some surprising opportunities with some midfielders dropping back later than you'd expect. So Luke Parker going back 10 plus years. Well, he went in the 40s. He was sort of seen as a late first rounder. So those sort of things happen. So he could be one that slips a little bit more than expected. But
No,
he's
nice.
always been around that sort of late first, early second, thereabouts range. So
Cool.
There could be an opportunity.
The last guy you got here is Will Verrell, a ruckman, and we know we just got rid of Brody Grundy, so we're pretty light on with Darcy Cameron, Aiden Begg, Mason Cox it'll be his last year, you would think. Tell me a little bit about Will from South Australia.
Yeah, sure. So what he does really well, so very strong contested mark, reads it beautifully. So whether it's forward of center, really strong mark, but behind the ball, I find really reads it well. So look, he's someone where he's played mostly as a ruck, can go key forward as well, but he just has one of those types of games that I think if he became a key defender would translate well. Probably a little short for ruck, but look, he could play through the ruck. So you've got a bit of optionality there potentially.
So look, we talked about Will in the ruck, and we talked about how this draft's more of a forward midfield. Collingwood, I feel, and I guess a lot of the clubs, it's really been, you've got your list of players on the whiteboard, and if it's the next best at your pick, the next one down the line if they've already gone. Collingwood supporters, we cry out for key position forwards, key position defenders. Is there sort of anyone, and I've got one guy in mind that I just get bombarded. When I tell you I get 1, 2, 3 messages a day about this guy, you probably know who I'm talking about. Isaac Keeler. I get a number of messages about him. Is that a guy that we can kind of look at between that 27, 29 sort of pick?
Yeah, so in that 20s range, he'd be someone where, look, if he's available, he's someone I think would be firmly on the radar and strongly considered. So the pies are thin, both in terms of both key forwards and rucks, and he can do a bit of both. So for me, he's better suited as a key forward, but his that sort of buddy style, I suppose, where incredible athletic profile, really prolific at ground level, can even push up the field a bit and really works quite hard. Probably relative weakness is his marking, where he can drop more marks than he probably should. But yeah, just a really good talent overall, can go through the ruck, that can give him a bit of touch, then he can go forward and have an impact. So there is some scope to develop there.
And is there anyone else we kind of should be watching out for on draft night that could kind of slip to us, maybe in that sort of key position, in sort of who we kind of want?
Yeah, so Harry Barnett is one that I think the Pies would love to see get to the 20s. So I don't think that'll personally happen. So if we're keen, we might need to go with our first pick on that one. I should also mention I'm a Pies fan, so get subscribed to AFL Draft Expert. Yeah, I just sort of gave it away with the we there. But yeah, look, Barnett as a ruckman, so he's the best ruckman in this draft class. What he does really well, incredible contested mark. Again, a bit like a Verrill, really reads it very well. And also through the ruck, you'll find oftentimes he just grabs it out of the ruck. So it might be a bit like a Brody Grundy scenario where Grundy with a former pick 18, being a South Australian, well, we've got another South Australian here in Barnett who could be well considered by Collingwood with that, in this case, this year first pick the club have. So.
And you said that if he gets to the 20s, amazing. We'll probably snap him up. Probably goes earlier than that. Do you see a lot of we can do trading, pick trading while the draft's going? Do you see Collingwood trying to get up to get these sort of players?
Look, I'd love to see it happen. There's a couple of names in particular that I've identified in the 9 to 13 range I would just love to get up to. But of course, the challenge is if ever you want to move up in the draft, you're always paying overs without exception to do so. So that's the sort of thing you have to weigh up. And you even have to look at, well, are there particular clubs where they might have a target in mind where maybe they can get the same player a few picks back, in which case that's really the opportunity where maybe that's possible. So for me personally, Mateus Phillipou, I think other than Will Ashcroft is the best player in the draft. Absolutely screams Marcus Bontempelli. Same height, same late year birthday, has all the same attributes and probably actually a little bit better as a midfielder at the same age and stage. And he's expected probably in that 9 to 13 range to feature. So I'd love to snap up a pick in that range to go get someone who's potentially, if all the development goes well, stays injury free, all that sort of thing. Well, yeah, there's the scope to really be an incredible difference maker. So I think he's one that clubs are and other draft observers are really underrating this year. So that's the player I'd really like to get up to.
That's the inside word from the draft expert. Look, I got on Instagram, I asked for a couple of names that we want to people that want to chat about. Isaac Keeler was one of them. Got another one here. Henry Lascock on Insta. He asks, or he put up a name, Ollie Hodden. Do you know much about him?
Yeah, so his dad actually played a few games for Collingwood back in the 90s, and then he went on. So this is Trent Hodden. So he was a key position player, could play a little bit of ruck as well. Then went to Carlton sort of around 2000, had a few years there, played a few games. But with Ollie, he's more that sort of mid forward. Really has a good all round game. Very athletic, good skills. Can hit the scoreboard, can win his own ball through the midfield a little bit. So, does a bit of everything really well. Good mark, good at ground level. So
what's the kind of
he's one of those guys with the attributes.
And what's the kind of predicted range for him?
Look, late first round. So probably if the Pies wanted him, it would be with that first pick.
Yeah. And
most likely. If he dropped into the 20s, then I think the Pies would probably snap him up.
That's really cool. Another name that's gotten floated around a couple of times, Matt Jefferson, a forward.
Yeah, so he's unlikely to make it to the Pies' first pick. He's probably another that fits into that sort of 9 to 13 range. Look, for me, I feel like he's almost a little bit of a trap. Look, if he fell to the Pies pick, I think that'd probably take him just out of needing those key position players. But to look at his game, very athletic, goal kicker, hits the scoreboard at a terrific rate, but probably doesn't work hard enough, doesn't find enough of the footy. And he's quite sort of light physically. He has had his sort of injury issues during the year, which might be the slight opportunity there where maybe his performance has been down as a result of that. But look, for someone that is expected to go that early, I think probably it's just a bit too soon for him to go. He's someone where, look, if he was maybe 20 plus, I'd be a bit more comfortable. But around the Pies first pick, I think it's a bit soon. And he's one where I look at his game and think he'd probably translate better to be a key defender, where his strength is really his athleticism, his marking. So it could be more that interceptor, whereas at ground level, I find he doesn't sort of find enough of it. So you sort of need a bit more of that, I guess, those additional tricks as well to be a really good, consistent forward.
Yeah. And look, the last guy that I kind of wanted to look at is Henry Hustwaite. Now, we know his brother plays in the VFL for us. He's been likened to, I guess they all get likened to him, but Scott Pendlebury type. What are your thoughts on Henry and his projected draft range?
Sure. So I wouldn't go with a Pendlebury comparison. In terms of skills, look, he doesn't have that sort of skill, doesn't have that same evasion, doesn't have those extra special tricks. But with a Hustwaite, I do like him, and I'd strongly consider him even at that first pick, but I think he might be available in the 20s, so that might be an opportunity for the Pies. Look, tall midfielder, really good ball winner. His contested numbers are really incredible and great distributor by hand. So they're really the tricks that you've got there. So you could think of him as I don't know, you could think of him as something like a physically lighter Patrick Cripps, stylistically, not saying is anywhere near that caliber, but that style of player to give you
that's interesting. So look, Chris, who would you're Derek Hine, you're sitting next to him on draft night for the Pies. Draft night's done. Who would you be happy with picking up?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And for me, so look, I would really work incredibly hard to get to somewhere around maybe St Kilda's first pick or Carlton's first pick, and I would be dying to get Phillipou with that first pick. With the other picks, I don't care how far I move back. As long as I get up to that guy as my target, I'd be pretty happy, honestly. But and then that would move the other picks back quite substantially, and then I'd be looking probably at more mature ages. So maybe it's the likes of maybe an Ethan Phillips, even a Connor McKenna coming back. I think could generate a lot of drive from defense. I think that could be an opportunity where what he was doing in terms of that rebound was incredible, and maybe it frees up a Dacos or a Crisp to play a bit more midfield, a bit more consistently. Maybe a Harry Boyd could be a ruck. So he was best on ground in the Sandford Grand Final. Maybe as a rookie, a Casey Voss. So they're the types of players that I particularly like. But in terms of the picks that we're holding, probably a Lewis Hayes would be good. Maybe a Hustwaite. That'd be probably two of the targets I'd be thinking about. And then it's really just looking at, the value with the other picks, really.
Yeah. So you're really putting you're trying to put your draft picks into the basket and get get up high enough to get Phillipou.
Yeah, because ultimately it's a case of, aside from the one father-son in Ashcroft, I personally believe he's the best other player available in the draft. So if I can get him around that, let's call it 10 mark, I'm not paying the equivalent currency of like a pick, let's call it 1, 2, or 3 to get up to him. So I think it's a reasonable calculated risk to take. But of course, you'd have to rate a Phillipou as highly as I do to really feel comfortable as aggressively as I would pursue that move up the draft board. So
no, perfect. Look, Chris, thank you so much for this chat. You've opened my mind. Like I said, I know nothing. It just goes right over my head. You are like an encyclopedia of knowledge, and it's amazing to have you on. And I hope to maybe get you on a little bit after the draft, and we can do stuff like that. But look, at the moment, here's your time to shine. Tell us where we can find you, where we can subscribe to, where we can read about you. The floor is yours, mate.
Sure. On Twitter at AFL Draft Expert. YouTube, again, AFL Draft Expert. You can also find me on espn.com.au/AFL. So I'll have regular content being posted up there. So yeah, make sure you check that out as well.
No, awesome. All the links will be down below. Chris, thank you so much, mate. I enjoyed myself thoroughly. Really a pleasure to have you on. I've been wanting to get you on for a while. Finally found some time and it was perfect. Thank you for your time. And we'll talk to you after the draft.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Luke.
Beautiful. Thanks, mate.